Welcome, Felicia.
How are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. Very good. How are you? How was your day?
It was busy. I'm glad I'm looking.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's amazing when you're involved in something, you get to see the same themes coming up in all places that you weren't cognizant of beforehand. It's nice to feel like, something is not isolated, like it's connected to everything. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you for joining in. And welcome, Susan.
Hello, Reb.
For being here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, I think, a little bit of the kitchen, a little bit of the office, a little bit of the living room. We got a vibe from all the different spaces in the homes here. I love it. We really...
I'm just on, but I'll make everybody dizzy moving the computer all around.
No worries. No worries. So let me know if is the pages moving very loud for you? When I turn the pages, is it very loud?
Oh, no.
No. Okay, that's great. Sometimes it creates a bit of a... Okay, so I don't know if everyone has a pen, but if you don't, please do grab one, because we'll have a couple of exercises we could do together. If you don't have your notebook next to you, your student book, please grab that as well. Some very cool exercises in this lesson that really make it worthwhile. And you have to think about it. I want everyone to think about these exercises and do them. Write down the answers if you can, because the engagement, you're engaging that part of the brain that says, oh, this actually means something. I want to think about this. Something about holding a pen. I'm not sure, but please do so. And before I start, I want to refer everyone to a resource, which is great. I didn't share it previously because I didn't know that it was open and available. I'll share the screen for you to see it, but it's just a link that you can take a look at. And it's continue learning online. Following the lesson, you could take a look at the meditation videos, those that we did. And even if we didn't cover both meditational videos, you could look them up on your own. And there are some very cool clips and different presenters that present classes that have been given, other times on similar topics that they've brought together on the resource page, as well as the PowerPoint here. So it's just a general resource page for all of the courses that are happening all over. myjli.com/meditation. So I don't know if anybody looked up the meditational videos with a Google Drive link, but sometimes it gets tricky. If it works, it doesn't work. You have to download it. This way, it's all available online. Okay, I think we're going to jump into it. And a couple of people are going to join us with the recording. So the group has actually expanded, but the live group this evening has shrunk a little bit. So they'll have to feed off our energy. We have to put in a lot of energy here for them. Welcome, Reb David. We're ready. And as it always goes, before we start, we've got to give an introduction. And I think that this introduction really will come full circle at the end of the class as well. And that's why it's kind of reverberating for me, and it's exciting to share as well. So first of all, really good for everyone. Really good to be with everyone this evening. Thank you, Jane, for joining. And it's special to be here because this is such a good course. But like we said, it's only meaningful because we're here together and making it the most meaningful that it could be for ourselves in our lives. So that's the reason that they invested in this course, so we could all take it in and we could all think about it and use these tools and use this information for our benefit. And it's not copyright. You're welcome to share. Please take advantage. I'll begin with a question. Again, we're having an introduction now. What is something that human beings crave the most? What do all human beings crave the most?
Connection.
Thank you. I thought we would hear chocolate, but apparently second to it's not sugar, huh, Shannon? There you go. So maybe the sugar has a secret about connection that we don't know about yet. But what do we crave the most? It's connection. When you say love, ultimately, what does love boil down to? It boils down to a connection. And what's interesting is that science has brought us to understand in a much greater way, and Hasidus has talked about this for many decades, that connection is not only important for us in terms of a relationship between me and a friend of mine, someone that I could trust, someone that I could connect with, someone that I could feel close with. That's the generic of connection. But the truth is, we crave connection in all of our experiences. In everything we do, what do we crave about that experience or with that thing? What do we really want? We want the connection in it. If I could use a different word that kind of is interchangeable, we want what's meaningful within it. We want the depth within it. For example, they're doing a lot of research about phones. Why are phones so addictive? Why are people so connected to their phones? And why are we spending so much time on it? And the answer is because it's so easy to feel connected to your phone. You have it in your pocket. You hold it in your hand and it fits. It stays with you. And that's what builds that nature of addiction to a phone that they're dealing with now on an intense level is of the connection that we create with those devices. So again, it's all the experiences. What do we really want? We really want the connection. We want the meaning behind it. So let's take this to the concept of meditation. Meditation kind of blew up in the 60s and 70s in the States, in the United States. It became a huge fad. Everyone was running after meditative groups and cults and running to ashrams, and they were really getting there was a lot of fixation on meditation. What was it really about? Now, in America, it wasn't so common. So obviously anything new gets some extra attention, but it wasn't just that they were providing a technique and a regimen, which is really cool. Imagine you have something brand new, you've never heard about this.
Really good class of meditation.
Welcome to our those that have joined just now. What was special about these meditational groups? It wasn't just the regimen and the technique. Technique you could learn online. Technique you could get a paper that tells you breathe in now, breathe in for 3 seconds, 4 seconds. That wasn't what grabbed everyone. What grabbed everyone within that whole culture of hype about meditation was something deeper that the meditative groups were offering beyond the technique and the regimen. When people saw what was being offered, what grabbed their attention was what was tangible, the technique, the regimen. Wow, I could meditate, I could gain from this. But ultimately, there was something deeper that was being offered to them that really held them. And that was spirituality. A certain spirituality was being transmitted in those meditational groups and cults that were developing at the time. And so the Jewish community, the rabbinical leadership at the time, in the 60s, weren't so aware of what was going on. But in the 70s, it had already become mainstream. And so the leadership took notice. So many Jewish people are running off to non-Jewish environments, and really it's an environment of another religion. That's not really appropriate. So what do we do about it? So in Israel, I don't know if you've heard of Ovadia Yosef, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He's a posek. He gives halachic guidance he gave halachic guidance for the Israeli community, the Sephardic community. He came out and he said, okay, this is not okay. This is not kosher. Let's stop this. And so he came out with a blanket ruling against meditation. But in America, I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe understood that, first of all, Americans are different. You can't give them a blanket ruling and expect everyone to just jump on board. It's a big world, you know, you've got to be a little bit more nuanced. So the Rebbe understood, and in his communication with the other rabbis in Israel, the Rebbe said, the techniques and the regimen of meditation are not the issue here. It's the meaning behind it that's being served within that context. That's the issue. Good. So let's make the Jewish option the Torah option with the regimen, the technique, and what will we provide? The spirituality that we'll provide will be the Jewish Torah version. And the Rebbe tried to get a group of professionals on board to set up a center, that this should become, you know, something that everyone knows about. But ultimately, it kind of got stuck at some point. They actually wanted to go really big and make a whole center. Maybe they chewed off more than they could manage because it got stuck there. They didn't make the center, and therefore it never materialized. It was going to be called Jewish meditation, JM instead of TM for transcendental meditation. I see some of you are, you know, it's clicking here. So what are we saying? Ultimately, what everyone craves is the connection, the meaning. So when we talk about meditation, it's just a question of what meaning are you serving with the technique and the regimen. And that's why we're here, to discover the deeper meaning behind it, in addition to obviously some techniques. But tonight, we're going to go to the inner question of what is the spirituality that is being offered here. What are we serving? What are we serving? What's on the menu? Talk about Jewish spirituality. What does that mean? And that's going to be the topic for this evening. And we're going to discover some very, very cool stuff. And so I'm happy that everybody's along for the ride. I'd like for you to take a look in your student books, page 38. Exercise 2.1. And take a look at the question there. How would you define spirituality? And then the follow-up question, which is equally important, how might spirituality be experienced? And I welcome you to use the chat as well, if you'd like, when you're ready to share it with everybody. Ronnie, could you give us a go?
Oh, I didn't even I didn't even finish
Good job.
writing, but I was thinking about spirituality as an opening up to something that's beyond our normal mundane world, the material world.
Great.
And recognizing that there's something bigger, something that we don't really understand, and just trying to be open to that channel.
Okay. But I heard you say something that we don't really understand. So we've got work ahead of us. Excellent. How about the second part of the question? How might spirituality be experienced?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that is probably different for different people, but for myself, I would answer sometimes through prayer, sometimes through silence, sometimes through eating.
Okay, we'll pause there. Thank you for sharing your answer. And I'm going to go straight to the chat. I see Josh. Thank you, Josh. Finding meaning in serving something outside of yourself. So opening yourself up to something beyond yourself, and but more than that, actually serving. And how might it be experienced? I see you have a second point there, being in a meaningful and a reciprocal relationship with another. Wow. Is there a definitive way and time that we feel spiritual? Could you think back to a specific time that you felt spiritual?
I mean, I think looking at a sunset or being in nature puts you in that zone.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. Tapping into collective energy, part of a whole. Wow, we have a deep group here. We're not playing games yet. How about
Giving birth?
kind of, if we could collect the 3 points that we've brought together. If I could summarize maybe 1 point out of all 3 that they share, something about what was shared, that spirituality is connecting with another, kind of going outside of ourselves. Is it fair to say that that was almost the consensus between all 3, was that you're pushing beyond the self that you recognize. You're going outside of yourself to experience the spirituality.
I would also add that it's intentional, finding spirituality. So I think it's not just something that, all of a sudden sort of hits you, but I think also being intentional, just about relationships, about prayer, about noticing nature, because it's easy to walk by wonders that exist right in front of us every day.
Excellent. Absolutely. So thank you. And Ronnie, relationships and the deepest elements of the relationships, we can say something about that being spiritual. What's interesting also about what we've shared is that it's a little bit less tangible. Now, maybe that's an obvious point, but it's less tangible. What do we live with that's the most tangible for us is physical material reality. Ultimately, we talked a little bit about this last time, spirituality is less tangible. But to focus on that point that we said, maybe we feel spirituality outside of our regular zone. Specific times, specific experiences. Maybe when you're by the kotel, by the Kotel Amaravi in Eretz Israel, and you're in a special zone. Maybe that's where we associate.
I'm going to challenge that, though.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But I think that there's a general consensus here. I'm not saying that that's the definition of it. I'm saying that that's generally how we associate with spirituality.
Right.
Okay. What we're going to discover is that ultimately we have an innate spirituality. What we would like to do this evening is go inwards, not shut out ourselves and dive into a spiritual existence, but rather go inwards and find the innate spirituality that we have within ourselves. I'll share a cute story. A fellow comes along Sunday morning and he's ready to stop at the CVS after his morning exercise, get himself a bottle of milk, bottle of orange juice, maybe a couple of crackers, whatever, his small Sunday morning fare, and make his way home. He makes his way to the cashier. He has his small bag of things and he hands her a 20. And she takes it, puts it into the till, and he's waiting. I mean, a couple of bottles and a couple of snacks, $7, $8. Where's my change? He's waiting for his change. He's waiting for his change. Finally, he says, ma'am, excuse me, could I please have my change? She says, sir, change must come from within. So it's cool because ultimately we know that change must come from within. And it's good to know that the goodness that we have is not out there somewhere. It's within us. And what we're going to do tonight is discover that treasure that we have inside. We're going to skip exercise 2.2, though you can go back to it at some point. And so let's consider, what are we? What do we have inside? When it's discussed in the Torah, right at the beginning about the creation of man, how does the Torah record the way God created man? Obviously, it talks about the creation of the world and each and every part, but then there's one record and sentence that the Torah records about the creation of man, and then it goes into the details. And you have this on page 40 of your student books. And I'm going to share it, though it's not the best, copy. You could zoom in on your end if you like. The source in text 1. And Josh, if you're available, could you read for us text number 1?
Yes. Yeah, actually, Yogurt is competing for my attention. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam afar min hadama vayipach bapav nishmat chayim. So God formed the human from the dust of the earth, and he breathed into the human's nostrils the soul of life.
Thank you. I think this is something we're familiar with. The neshama is called a neshama, a soul, from the source, the root neshima, breath, because God breathed into Adam the soul of life. But take a look. It actually records the creation of man in 2 parts. All beings, all creations, it says, and God created them. He created the fish. He created light. When it comes to man, it says, one second, there are 2 parts here. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim, God formed et ha'adam, man, afar min ha'adama. What was he forming when he formed him from the dust of the earth? What part of man was being formed? What part of us comes from the dust and returns to the dust?
The soul.
Oh, thank you, the physical body. The physical body had that form that was being formed in the dust. And then into that physical body, which already had its form, God breathed the soul of life, which means you have two entities here. You have the body and the soul that were formed separately and then were brought together. How do we exist? How do we function in a duality? We actually have 2 parallel functions that we live with, which are so different. We live with the function of our body, our very corporeal, very mundane existence, which we're very closely familiar with. I mean, you don't need to tell me how something tastes. I could taste it. I could feel it. I wake up in the morning, I feel the weight. If I'm tired, I feel energized. I feel my body and all the material very, very immediately. But at the same time, we were given a soul. Now, how different is the soul from the body? How would you describe a soul? If you could give a word, a description of the soul, how would you describe it?
Non-material.
Non-material. Thank you, but that's not the best description.
Ephemeral.
Again?
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral. Could you explain that reference?
It's spirit.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
You
So
don't touch it. You don't,
ethereal. Oh, excuse me. I thought I didn't hear correctly. Ethereal. Yes, absolutely. So this is the text number 2 on the screen. Take a look in your student books. How do we describe the soul? We say, my God, this is a prayer from the morning. The soul that you've given, that you've placed within me is pure. You created it. You formed it. You breathed it into me. Where does the soul come from? It comes from God. Well, that's a very special, unique kind of entity.
it's okay, Daisy.
And how would we describe the soul? So when we describe the soul, we give the reference as it's found in Proverbs and Mishlei, a specific description, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam. The human soul is like the candle of God. It's like a flame. How is a flame unique from all other entities in this existence that we're familiar with? How would you imagine the flame being a metaphor for the human soul?
It yearns to go upward.
Thank you. However you turn a candle, the flame always yearns upwards. Now visualize it. You light a candle. First of all, how long does it take you to light a candle? Even to get the match lit is difficult. It's difficult to produce fire, and it's difficult to hold on to it because in a minute or two, it's gone. And then you have to get it to the flame, and the flame lights up, but it constantly strives upwards. What does that represent? It's constantly ready to expire. It's ready to go. If you're not holding me here, I'm going to go. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go back to my source. That is literally the opposite of every other type of existence. Every other type of existence wants to be grounded, wants to be firm, wants to be steady. It wants to support itself. And yet the flame always looks to expire. The neshama, the soul, is like the opposite of the body. It's not just that there are two entities here. They each have such distinct agendas. We live with the body. We're very familiar with the body. What about our soul? How familiar are we with our soul? So I'll share a quick anecdote and we'll jump into it. The fellow, you know the story about the fellow from Krakow. His name was Isaac. And one day he has a dream. And in his dream, he sees a treasure buried deep under a bridge in Prague. He wakes up from his dream and he's thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm a poor man, but I'm not going to be poor anymore. I'm going to have access to a treasure that no one knows about. And he goes and he makes his journey to Prague and he starts to dig under the bridge. And guess what? Soon enough, an officer passes by and he asks him, excuse me, what are you doing under the bridge here? He says, listen, what could I lose? I might as well tell him the truth. He says, I had a dream that there's a treasure here and I'm looking for it. And so the officer begins to laugh. Are you nuts? Because you had a dream, you came from Krakow to Prague? That's ridiculous. You know what? I'll tell you the truth. I also had a dream last night. In my dream, I learned that in a fellow Isaac's home in Krakow, under the oven, there is a treasure. But you see me traveling to Krakow? Of course not. It's just a dream. Meanwhile, Isaac hears, I probably better head back home and I'll find my treasure there. And indeed, he goes back home and he discovers the treasure under his own home. And so apparently this has been shared many times and we're not always sure that this is true, but I believe in Krakow there is a shul named Isaac's shul because he was a pauper and yet he managed to build a shul with the gains that he had come across. And so this is a true story, but ultimately what are we sharing in the story? Sometimes we search for the treasure elsewhere, but the treasure is within us. So what we're going to do tonight in the next hour is try the best we can to discover how do we access the treasure. And think of the anecdote. The treasure in Isaac's story was where? Was it accessible?
No.
Thank you. Buried with what covering the treasure?
Soil.
Simple dirt. Dirt, dirty. I mean, he's not a fellow that gets messy and starts digging on a regular basis. So it's covered and it's deeply entrenched, but it's covered by all of this stuff on top. And so we're going to have to understand better, how do we access this treasure? We're so familiar with the material. If the spiritual treasures are within us, but how do we access them? It's like the secret everyone knows, but nobody knows how to access. It's available for everyone, but the trick is, how do we access it? And that's what we're going to discover tonight with two particular directions that we're going to take to discovering and accessing this treasure. And in the big picture of the Jewish meditational course that we're doing tonight, that we're doing these couple of weeks, we spoke about three particular types of meditation. If you remember from last week, we said there are three types of meditation that make up the Jewish meditation basis, and that is kavanah, focus, hitbodedut, which was transcendent meditation, and hitbonenut, which was cognitive, focused meditation, going deeply into an idea. So within those three, tonight's class will be about the second two. Last week, we spoke about kavanah, focus, how to intently direct your thoughts, and the techniques that you could use to make sure that you're able to focus them where you choose. That was what we spoke about last week. Tonight, we'll do the other two, hitbodedut and hitbonenut. I'll pause for a moment if there are any critical questions for clarifying what we've discussed till now, but otherwise we have a lot yet to go. And so I'd love to jump in. Any questions, comments, questions? Okay, we're all clear. That's great. So we want to access this treasure. How do we do it? How do we get in touch with our spirituality? I want, like Felicia said, my spirituality should not be random. When I see a sunset, that's when I should feel spiritual. But why am I dependent on that? I want to be able to access it in a direct way. I want to be able to be in charge. I want to be able to direct and grow. I can't be dependent on the sunset to help me grow. I've got to be invested from the morning, So how do we access these special treasures directly? And we're going to do the next two parts. First, hitbodedut, and second, hitbonenut. So think about this. Again, Isaac digging for his treasure. He needs to remove the dirt in order to tune into the specialty of what is below. So we live with so many different experiences that could be experienced on a very superficial level. And somehow our routine kind of puts us into that kind of grinder. You just go with the flow. Whatever your routine is, you just go with it. And allowing the noise to be a little bit more dim will help us hear the music that is the beauty of our soul's expression. Meaning, in order to tune into the spiritual treasure of the soul, we're going to need to kind of let go of some of that intense focus on the material needs that we have. And when we let go of them, we give ourselves a little bit more headspace for something else. There's a fascinating fact in the Talmud, when the Talmud records an expression, a phrase that describes somebody who is blind. How does the Talmud describe somebody who is blind? Anybody pull out their Talmud general knowledge?
Without vision?
Without vision, okay?
It's a guess.
How does vision work? You need light to see, correct? So you would think that a blind person experiences the world in darkness. And indeed, if you would go to the Blind Museum in Israel, which is an incredible experience, and I see some nodding. I don't know anybody other than Ronnie being there. Oh my gosh, apparently it's well worth a visit. They take you through the museum in absolute darkness. That's how you experience the museum. So we think of blind people, they can't see it's dark for them. How does the Talmud describe someone who is blind? Sagi Nahor. This is a person who has a lot of light. A lot of light is someone who is blind. How does that work? And the answer is they don't have the corporeal vision. They don't see the material. And because they don't see the material, it allows them to a far greater degree to tune into the spiritual. So their material vision, they relate to the material in a much more dim, more passive, more calm way. And so they're able to focus in the spiritual sense in a much clearer, much more bright way. Think about that. Saginar, think of a blind person as someone who has this immense capacity for relationships, for all things spiritual. Everything that has a deeper meaning, they could relate to in a more prevalent way. I'll share an interesting story. There was a fellow, a big banker, who was initially from Brazil, and because of the bank's branches that had opened up all over the world, and he was one of the children of the owner, he had traveled to different countries to help them set up the branches and help the business get established there. So he was in England, and then he moved back to the States. He came by the Lubavitcher Rebbe on a Sunday morning for a short meeting at the opportunity to get $1 by the Rebbe and share some words. And he receives his $1 and he shares with the Rebbe that he had moved to the States, but his son, who is autistic, they left in England, because in England he had a center, a clinic, or wherever he was part of a program that helped him, that gave him what he needed. So they left him there because they felt to move him from England was too much moving around and too much change. It would ruin his established care schedule. So it was hard for them to leave him in England, but at the same time, being that their lives were like a little bit all over the place, they felt that was best for him. He shares this with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe makes a note that although about this boy, that he should know, this dad should know, although autism limits the communication with others, other human beings, but that doesn't mean that their communication is limited, full stop. Their communication with God and with spiritual things is actually much more enhanced than the rest of us have. Meaning their limit on the one end creates an enhancement on the other. And so he grabbed onto this expression that the Rebbe said, and he said, you know what? He has a hard time speaking, but whenever we ask him to say a blessing over the food before he eats, he says it clearly. He pronounces it so correctly. He says it's amazing. When he's focused on the blessing, he's able to speak clearly, but when he's interacting with others, it's quite difficult. So this was an example of how do we access the treasure? We have two different consciousnesses happening inside of us, the body consciousness and the soul consciousness. How do we access the soul? The first technique is going to be hitbodedut, which means limiting, transcending, removing ourselves from the environment of stimulation of material things, allowing that to get quieter so that we could hear the voice of the soul. I'm going to share the meditation at this point. And the meditation is going to allow you to realize that there are these two voices inside of you. There is the voice of the body, and in the meditation, he uses the term nefesh behemet, the animal soul, which means the soul that relates to everything the way it's immediately perceptible. And then the voice of the godly soul. So what he does is actually interesting. He takes you to a place of strength within yourself. He says, find a safe, solid place within yourself, and then allow yourself to hear these two voices and realize how they are so different and which one you would prefer to listen to because of the value it gives. Oh, excuse me, I'm gonna cancel this share. Stop share, we'll do this again. Sorry, from current slide.
We have two voices speaking to us from within. One voice is our lower order self, Nefesh Bahamis. The Nefesh Bahamis urges us to live a life of pleasure, of ease, getting what we want whenever we want it. The other voice is the voice of the Nefesh Elokis. That's our godly self. That's the self that seeks connectedness with people in love, connectedness with the world and its elements, feeling fulfilled, connectedness with Hashem. Gently close your eyes and just become aware of your inner self, your inner quiet, that place you can escape to, because it's always a place where you have your own sense of self. Allow that special place to be your refuge. that place of inner sanctity, totally protected, always safe. As you step out of that space, become aware of your two inner voices. Listen to the voice of the Nefesh Bahamis. Note what it tells you. It says, you're insecure in this world. You need to shore yourself up. You need more and more and more. Otherwise, you're unsafe. Build walls around you. Wealth. Create superficial pleasures, because life is short. The Nefesh Bahamis is the voice of the ego. Now listen to the truer voice of the Nefesh Elokis, the voice that tells you that everything possesses truth and meaning, that your happiness and joy comes from connecting truly to people, to the world around you, by connecting to the inner selves, the soulful center. The voice that tells you pleasure doesn't come from material acquisition. It comes from the smile of appreciation for having helped someone, for the small gift that you give your grandchild, for the blue sky that you wake up to. In life, choose which voice you are going to listen to. It may be that you don't need to have a battle within, a fight between them. You might even be able to transform the Nefesh Bahamis into an ally, giving its energy the capacity to do the right things. But always allow yourself to recognize that your true voice is the voice of the Nefesh Elokis. In so doing, your life will be replete with happiness and fulfillment.
Okay, so how different are those two voices? And we want the better voice. We want to be able to access and understand, appreciate where the better voice is coming from. You know, when someone tells you to do something, imagine a voice popped up in your mind one day and said, I think you should do this. I think you should walk out of your house right now and turn right, go down the road and turn left. You have a choice. You could listen, you don't have to listen. But let's say you choose to listen, or it's somebody who is actually advising you and giving you a solid piece of advice, but it's coming from their perspective. You don't really know it. You don't really understand it. When you listen, you just listen. You're pushing yourself. But how much more meaningful is it when you could understand their perspective, where they're coming from, and why they're advising you this way? Isn't that much better? When you connect with it, you understand why this is what it's telling you. This is what we want to do tonight. We know the voice of the neshama. We often know the voice that advises us in certain areas in a certain direction. But what we want to do tonight is get in touch with what is the neshama's viewpoint? How does the neshama see things? How does the soul see my reality? And why is it that that's the correct advice based on that viewpoint? So we said, how are you going to access this viewpoint? How are you going to access your soul? First of all, you have to tone down the noise, the stimuli of stuff, just a lot of stuff going on. Got to tone it down. What's the best day of the week? Hands down.
Shabbat.
Thank you. The Shabbos is the best day. Now, Shabbos is a special day very much because of just the word itself. What is the word? Rest. Resting from all of that busyness. Now, it doesn't stop there. You've got to allow the opportunity, once you've rested, you've got to allow yourself to go a little bit deeper then and discover the more meaningful elements of what's available to you now. But first of all, you just have to rest in order to get there. So the process of hitbodedut is going to be removal of all of the external busyness and going to a place of quiet, going to a place apart from others to a certain degree, apart from the regular context that you live with, and therefore allowing your neshama to open up a little bit more. In the text that we'll read, text 43, actually, I'd like for you to first go to page 44, sorry, text number 6, Finding the Spirit Within. You may be familiar with the name Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, Isaac Luria, the Arizal, and he was a famous Kabbalist in Tzvat. He barely wrote any of his own teachings, but his teachings were written down by his Talmidim, his students, and those that came afterwards. And so this is a teaching from him, text number 6, page 44. Jane, would you share with us the text?
Sure.
Thank you.
It is recorded in many of the works of the medieval rabbis that seclusion, hitodedut, is that separation from everything mundane, parashut, and devotional clinging, devekut, am I saying?
Yes, pretty good.
Okay, were practiced by the pious Jews. This is to say that when they were alone, they would empty their minds of all worldly concerns and connect their minds with the master of all existence. The famed Kabbalist, the Arizal, taught that this practice is far more beneficial for the soul than study, and that every person should practice this seclusion meditation according to their ability, either once a week, once a fortnight, or at the very least, once a month.
Okay, so what we'll call this is spirituality by subtraction. So you're trying to get somewhere, but you're actually getting there by subtracting some of the other noise and allowing yourself to tune in. And what this does is actually, it's almost like you're opening up the road in front of you. And you can now go on a spiritual trip, right? You've now opened up your heart, you've opened up your neshama. But where are you going to go with this depends on how advanced you might be in your knowledge of spiritual things. So someone who was on the level of a Mishnaic teacher or a Navi or a prophet, they were so advanced, they understood spirituality and their spiritual makeup so well that they could go on a spiritual trip, so to speak. They could open themselves up, go to the fields and open themselves up, and they would then be able to travel on a spiritual journey. And because they were already advanced in the knowledge of where they were going, they could go quite far. They knew the signposts. They had like the directional signposts were clear to them. This is where you go when you go left. This is the direction you're heading. This is how far you are. But for someone who's very basic, who's just initiating their spiritual journey, in terms of how are we connecting with God and how much do we know about godliness, we're a little bit more on the basic side. So we could open ourselves up by removing the other stimulants, but we don't necessarily know how to direct our footsteps on that journey. Does that make sense? So when a prophet would want to reach the level of prophecy, he would first remove all the other stimuli, all the other stuff that he was busy with. He would go to a quiet place. He would allow his neshama to open up, and then he would actually go on a journey, and he would reach the heights, spiritual heights, because he knew where he was going. And ultimately, he was able to kind of tune into a frequency of prophecy. That's incredible. They talk about the entering the orchard, how these extremely advanced sages, Torah sages, entered the orchard. That means the spiritual realms. And they actually were negatively affected by that experience to some degree. Because who are we? We're a body and a soul. Our existence is a body and a soul. When we allow our soul to shine and we go on that spiritual trip journey, so to speak, ultimately, what do we need to do is bring those spiritual treasures back to the existence of our body-soul connection. But if you go on the spiritual trip without that intent, you could ultimately ruin the spiritual, the body-soul connection, because you're allowing the soul to just expire. And that's indeed what happened with the sage Ben Azai. He went on this spiritual journey into the Pardes, into the secrets of the Torah, and he expired. He passed away. It tells of another sage, Ben Zoma, who was crazed by that experience because he couldn't relate it back to his experience on the ground, his life on the ground. He had this wonderful spiritual experience, but he couldn't relate it to his reality on the ground. And so it was like traveling between these two places made him crazy. Another experienced this spiritual trip, and again, because he couldn't relate it to his reality on the ground, he actually became a heretic. He decided that there must be so many spiritual worlds and existences and gods, and the world of spirituality became, excuse me, the lights are off again. Moment. I'm experiencing the world in darkness. Thank you. Call on Moti when you need him. Thank you, Moti. So he went on this trip, but he wasn't able to bring it back down. And it tells of one sage, Rabbi Akiva, who was able to exit this wonderful journey in peace. And in the Talmud, it describes Rabbi Akiva's experience as follows. Each one of them were negatively impacted by the experience, except for Rabbi Akiva, who was positively impacted. But it doesn't only describe the impact of the journey on him, it describes how he entered into it. It says Rabbi Akiva was unique. He was nichnas b'shalom. He entered it with peace, and therefore he exited also with peace. Because of the way he entered into the experience, he was able to gain from it and bring those treasures home. Does that make sense? Imagine you're accessing the treasures of your soul. That's a wonderful thing, but your soul is speaking a different language than you're used to, than the material languages that we speak all the time. Ultimately, what do we want to do? We want to bring those treasures home. We want to anchor ourselves with that spiritual gain. So hitbodedut is wonderful, but it opens you up without necessarily taking you to a specific place. It just opens up your sensitivity, your soul sensitivity, which is good. But we are going to, in the second section now, do a different kind of meditation. Not subtracting, which is going to a quiet place and getting our minds clear of everything, but rather the focusing on what we could understand about the soul, and therefore knowing the viewpoint of the soul and delving into the different ideas that we could understand clearly. And that could help us get the direction that we need. So I'm going to pause now for a moment and ask you if you feel that hitbodedut is something that is necessary in one's life in order to have the existence of a Jew and access your spirituality. Do you feel that hitbodedut is a necessary detail?
I
Put up
do.
the hands if you think that it is. Oh, we have half and half of you. We should play tennis. We have 4-on-4. We'll rock. We'll throw the ball back and forth. Yeah. Okay. So then let's not move too far forward if we haven't, if we're not on the same page. What are we sensing here? What's wrong about toning down the noise? Does that not bring out a better sensitivity?
I think you could do it without going into actual physical seclusion. I mean, when I meditate with a group of people, I feel like I'm experiencing this. I mean, everybody else is also. So, I mean, it's quiet, you know, it's except for the sounds of people breathing, which I kind of appreciate. I guess I just don't think it has to be done with actual physical seclusion.
Okay, thank you. So you're clarifying, maybe we can ask the question, does this need to be done absolutely alone?
Yeah.
And I guess there are varying levels and degrees of this meditation and how one, for their particular personality, how one is able to tone down that noise. And you're saying for you, it works to be together with a group as well. But how about if you had opened the window and just outside the window, you had a group of construction workers that were taking a break from their work, and they were having a loud conversation about their very maybe not so spiritual ideals that they were busy with at the time, or the football or whatever it was. So coming through the window is all this conversation about the football. So again, it's not about alone, but it's about being able to focus on these things because you've closed the window. You know, when you have a Zoom and someone's distracted a little bit and their microphone is on and it's busy in the background over there, it's just hard.
It's hard, but it's not impossible.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Shannon?
I just think, so I didn't raise my hand, but I do think it's like to be alone and get really uncomfortable. It's like very uncomfortable, right? Because we're so social. It does like strip away some sort of layer that, yeah, like I got to go be alone with people. Like there were people around, but you're alone practicing. And it was very uncomfortable and extraordinarily difficult and extraordinarily like meaningful. Like, I don't think it's possible to understand it until you've experienced it in a way. And also like, there's something about being taken care of in those spaces. Like it's counterintuitive because our ego helps keep us alive, and like we need to feed ourselves and regulate our temperature and have shelter and care for others. And so to go off like the zealots, like into the forest, and, you know, there is this need to be taken care of. And so if you are alone in community, like you think of the appeal of like this kind of like a meditation center where you don't have to worry about, am I safe? Am I going to go hungry?
Good.
Is, you know, it's like another layer of like amazing actually to have that care for you. And so it's, to me, it's not about like going off into the wilderness and sitting in a cave or taking some sort of epic trek, which I think can definitely do it. But yeah, like there's different ways of having that solitude that I do think how quickly when you enter life, this the feeling of the solitude is drained away. Like,
Okay.
you know, I could like sign me up right now. Like, let me go away. Like, like every year for like a month. Like, I'll see you all later. So,
Wait,
it is.
so you're saying a lot of things, Alison. I think you're saying a lot of things. But first of all, thank you for sharing. And I think you said a few different points. So it's maybe maybe we can focus on one or two. But like you said, there is this meaningful element of being with others and being taken care of, and life has its energy. There is also, I think you were saying that there is something very special about being on your own that kind of surprises you. But again, not lonely. The word is not lonely. Not lonely. That's a word we don't like, because it's not true. You're not lonely, but you're making time, you're making space to be alone in some way that is out of the context of the noise. But okay, I don't think we could argue that I think we're all saying ultimately it's helpful. It's helpful to minimize the distraction and to focus. That's it for the do's. And you have in here a lot of different texts and many different techniques of the hitbodedut and how it's practiced in different ways. Some say to be quiet, and some practice the hitbodedut by going off on their own, but speaking out and kind of giving it all out, giving out whatever's in there, all that stuff that's knocking around in there, let it come out, speak. Reb Nachman of Breslov would say, just talk, let it all out, and then eventually you could rest. The neshama is so different than the body consciousness. The body consciousness is worried, it's short-sighted. The neshama is calm, it's eternal, and therefore it's not worried. So we get to a really good place when we allow that neshama to come through. So I don't think that if you're getting to a negative place, maybe it just means that you're still worried about something. So you're actually not yet letting go of the things that you're worried about and allowing the calm voice to come through. But again, we all experience things differently. We have a different preference of how we connect and how we relate. So I think for each individual, this could be done in a different context. But that's just the first step. What about hitbonenut? What about active cognitive contemplation? So we till now we did spirituality by subtraction. Now we'd like to do spirituality by intention. Like we said before, imagine someone with a voice tells you to do something, but you don't know why they said that. You don't know what they're seeing that you don't see. If only you could see what they were seeing. So we're going to do a meditation, which is a little different than the process of meditation we did earlier. This meditation is going to help us understand the viewpoint of the neshama. We're going to take one example of how the neshama, the soul, sees the world and try to understand it and try to inculcate it for ourselves. So this kind of meditation is not a meditation where you close your eyes necessarily, but it's about delving into an idea deeper and deeper and understanding it better and better and better, to the point where you've understood it, and now you just begin turning it over in your mind. I'll show you quickly the image that we looked at last week to give you a better understanding of what I'm talking about right now. This kind of meditation is different. This meditation is not by closing the eyes, it's by understanding and connecting intellectually with an idea until you connect with it. Like we said last week, there are 3 intellectual factors and powers that we work with our minds. The first is chokhmah. When one wants to brainstorm, he's using his energy of chokhmah, his ability to come up with an idea. An entrepreneur, you have these people that come up with these brilliant ideas all the time. That's the chokhmah. They are experts at chokhmah. But what they need is someone to ground them. Hey, you've got this wonderful idea, but who really needs it? Who wants it right now? How is this going to work? I'll share this with you again, excuse me. The bina, the understanding, is grounding the idea with all the details. Let's flesh this out. You can ask a million questions. You're not challenging, you're just asking to clarify. And so it's a dialogue. Bina is this dialogue back and forth of questions and answers, clarifying all the details. So you have the idea, you have all the details. Imagine you have a piece of paper, you've got the vision, you've got all the steps. So what are you missing? You're missing that. The third step is when one connects with the idea and then you know it. It's not just information, it becomes internalized, it becomes knowledge. So consider a person who has a wonderful idea and they've gone through all the details, but what are they missing? They're kind of coming off a heavy meeting and they tell you, you know what? I've got to sleep on it. I've got to sleep on it. What happens when they sleep on it? Excuse me, it's making noise, my computer here. What happens when they sleep on it? The idea gets turned over in their mind. Subconsciously, your mind plays with the idea and listens to the voices of and the words of the idea again and again and again. Repetition. That repetition solidifies the idea and your connection with it. That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take an idea. We're going to present it, then break it down into the details, and then look to practice just turning over the idea and applying it in our lives throughout this coming week. And this is the Hitbonenut meditation. And I believe that this is awesome. This is really good because this is something we could all do and we could all understand it in our own level, but by asking questions, understand it better and better and better. So what did we start with? What did our big session start with? What does everyone, human being, crave? Connection. Ultimately, in every experience, what are we looking for? The depth, the meaning within it. The Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Chabad Rebbe, in his discourses presents an idea about tshuva, about repentance, about return to God. And he presents the idea by explaining the concept that everything in the world has a body and a soul. Everything in the world has a body and a soul. Let's go into it, because he shares not one, not two, but 3 points that I think you'd enjoy. This is student book, page 53. Now, in the student book, pages just in the last couple of pages before this, it brings a couple of different sources that share with us what Hitbodedut is about. And I'll share with you the screen here. If you've come across the phrase "V'hashevota el levavecha," you should know God. V'yadata hayom, you should know today, and you should bring it to your heart. Take it to heart. When you take something to heart, that's ultimately what we want to do tonight. Get through the idea, understand it well, and then take it to heart. Okay, let's see where we're at. Here we go. Text number 13, but we're going to skip to the English, and I'm going to read it because it's a long text, and bear with me. Page 54 in the student books. Everything that exists is comprised of a physical form and a spiritual. Divine energy that creates and animates the entities, everything that exists, starting again, is comprised of a physical form and a spiritual, divine energy that creates and animates the entity's physical existence. This is clearly demonstrable in animals and humans. They have an animating spirit. If the spirit were to leave their body, the body would no longer be classified as alive, and the body would begin to decompose and turn to dust. That is because the very existence of the body hinges upon the spiritual energy that animates it. The same is true of vegetation. It also possesses an animating spirit. Even inanimate objects like rocks, for example, I'm adding in here, it's just lying there. It's not moving. It doesn't look like it's breathing. They also possess some sort of energizing spirit that keeps them in existence and prevents their disappearance. Now, based on this awareness, we've begun the second paragraph. Spirituality is referred to as good and life because it is living force that remains alive and in existence forever. Whereas physical matter is referred to as negative and death because it decomposes and ceases to exist without the spirit within it. And it has no means of existing independently. From our flesh, I can perceive God, meaning that human experience informs our understanding of God. So till now, we talked about the body and the soul of all material things that we have in our universe. We intuitively sense that we have a life force that provides us with our life, and that is our primary identity. And that were our soul to leave our body, the body would be left like an inanimate rock and eventually decompose and disappear. The same is true with all that exists. The entire cosmos, the entire world, and all its contents exist due to a divine spirit that gives existence to everything. That divine light and force is the entire life and sustaining power of all that exists. If it departs, all existence will revert to absolute nothingness. If we meditate on this idea, we will realize that material existence of each entity is entirely dependent on the spiritual force within it, and that physicality is nullified before the presence of the divine light within its source of existence. This realization will inspire a powerful desire, a love, a yearning for the divine. We will no longer desire that which exists only superficially, which is in fact death. All we will desire is to attach to the divinity that is true life and the mainstay of existence. I'd like for you to turn to the following page, page 56. And you'll see that there are a couple of exercises that are important to pay attention to. And this is gonna be crunch time. Okay, I want everyone to lean back, rest your arms, stretch your arms, whatever works for you, and engage for these next 10 minutes, because these exercises are going to bring the idea to be very clear for you. So first of all, take a moment and record 3 key ideas that the text we just read present. What are the 3 key ideas? that are shared. Again, that is text 13, the English on page 54, 55. Alex, it's good to see you, and I'll make sure to get you some PDF copies to look at afterwards. You can explore the text a little bit later, God willing. If you're done, I'd love for you to put what you've completed into the chat so we don't have to yet say it. You know, still have everyone thinking about it, but if you can, plug it into the chat so we could look at it together. Okay. Loving this. Thank you for putting into the chat. Let's keep the typing going because this is good stuff. And then I'll take everyone's attention to it as soon as we're ready. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm gonna focus on Shannon's input, but first of all, thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Ronnie, for your typing. Shannon and Ronnie writes at the start said the same. We are made of divine energy. Life force or spirit exists within everything. I'm going to echo what Ronnie said. Life force and spirit exists within everything. Everything has a body and a soul. Key number one. Second of all, Felicia, all things expire without the living force and divinity. That's step number two. That the force, the energy within is the primary, and the body of everything is the secondary. That's the second point. First point is everything's got a body and a soul, but point number two is the spiritual is the primary and the physical, the material body, the form is the secondary. And without it, it would expire. Without the force, it would just expire. But third of all, and Ronnie would have to get back to this and clarify another time what you mean, the different levels of spirituality. You're right that he mentions different types of, let me focus on what Stephen wrote at the, towards the end here. Spiritual energy is forever and infinite. So that's the primary. That's the best that you could get. I'm waiting for the last one. What do the first two details tell us? If everything has a body and a soul is the best of the best, the soul is the more primary element of it. What would you desire when you're looking to engage with something? What would you desire? What element of it would you look to connect with? Its body or its soul? Thank you. It's soul. That's the third element. That's the third key here. So the first two, and then the takeaway. Okay, great. Let's do exercise 2.4 in page 56. Identify the body and the soul of the following scenarios. And we're going to do two of them. When you have dinner with a spouse or a friend, what is the body of the experience and what is the soul of the experience? Just go with the simple. Josh.
Sorry, are you asking me to read, or you had was it the question I'm answering?
Exercise 2.4, and you could fill these out. I'd like for everyone to fill these out when you get a chance, but because we're tight for time, we're gonna go through two examples together, or at least you can share. Dinner with a spouse or a close friend. What is the body and what is the soul?
Body is the food, and
Right.
the soul is the connection.
Great, thank you. What is the experience if you had sucked out the soul? What would it look like?
A lot of burping and
Very good, brilliant. It's like gross. What am I eating? Pieces of rice stuck together, like a little bit of oil. What's the point here? Someone said last night, what about a TV dinner? Exactly. You replace the soul and connection with somebody else with the TV. That's what's providing your current soul for your interaction here. What if somebody's on their own, they're eating on their own? They need to fill that experience with something meaningful for it to be satisfying. So for some, it's taking a picture of their meal and sending it out to a friend, or thinking, wow, this is a good recipe. I'm going to make this recipe, and like playing out the scenario when you're going to make this recipe next. Oh, now you're connecting with the experience here. It's not just food. But what's the food without the experience? So little, a bunch of verbs. That's gross. And ultimately, what do we want when you go out to dinner? What if somebody told you, no, honestly, I love the food at this particular restaurant. I don't really need anyone to go with, but I'm happy to go with you. You want to go with me? You want the connection. You don't want the food. Might be a fancy restaurant, but yes, go ahead, Steve.
It's like, it makes me think of, it's the meal where you get the calories, but you don't get the nutrients.
Cool.
Right? You get energy to live, but you don't get the depth of really feeding you at the cellular level.
Very cool. I like the categorizations. Thank you. How about the second example? Disciplining a child. What is the body and what is the soul? Shout out to Lev, who's joining us here with all his goodness.
Has some commentary here for sure.
Josh has a question that he wrote in the chat.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Josh.
But Jane responded about the reprimand being the body. I think she was saying the verbal.
We're running out of time here.
Yeah.
We can get back to that for whoever wants to stay after. Take a look. What I need help here. Have you written anything? What is the body and what is the soul?
Jane responded to that. And that's what I'm saying.
Thank you.
In the chat. Yeah.
To Josh. Verbal reprimand is the body. Love and care is the soul. Thank you, Jane. Great. You've nailed it. Now it's not only verbal reprimand. The body could come in so many different forms. Correction of any sort. But ultimately, what is it about? Care. You know what correction is without care? It's a correctional officer at a facility that nobody wants to be at because it's really unpleasant to be in those facilities. The prisons, unfortunately, are such terrible places because the people that are providing the reprimand are really uncaring for their charges. So the love and the care is the soul. Thank you. So we have a soul and a body in everything. Without that care, correctional facility is not a good place. It might be correctional, but it's just not good. It doesn't have a good result. And ultimately, what do we want? We want that connection. We want that care. And that's why, page 57, text 14, what does the Torah tell us in Deuteronomy? What does Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, whose birthday and Yahrzeit is today, what does he tell us? Again and again and again. The Torah, God has placed in front of you, text number 14, page 57. This day I call upon heaven and earth as witnesses. I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. You shall choose life so that you and your offspring will live. Life and death, who exactly is going to choose death? Why do you need to suggest choosing life? But the answer is, go ahead, Steve.
Well, it's like we learned about it at the beginning when you said, when it's like Hashem breathes life into us. So it's the life that is that spirit. It's extra energy. We don't get that naturally. The mundane way of living life is not living the breath of God. So what this says is that it's asking us to inhale, exhale Hashem with consciousness. If we don't choose that, we're living a life of death.
So thank you. But not only our soul, everything that we do, everything that we engage in, we are being asked to engage with the life of it rather than the death of it. Engage with the meaningful depth within it rather than its superficial form. So when you go out to dinner, you should know that it's in your hands how you fill this experience with meaning. What's going to fill it with meaning? Is it going to be the TV, whatever's on? Or is it going to be me finding a connection in this dinner with someone, a closeness? Every experience, I could choose life. And that's going to take us full circle. How do we define spirituality? And with this, we'll close. Based on our conversation today, how do you define spirituality? Can someone give us a shout out?
I think the Torah is our blueprint. It's meant to be our blueprint
Let's
for
focus.
infusing our life with spirituality.
And what did we learn today? What is the definition of spirituality? Soul
Connection.
within everything. That spirit within everything is the definition of reality, the soul within everything. And how do you experience spirituality? By zeroing in on the soul. And so when we allow that to exist for ourselves and in every interaction that we have, we reinforce that spiritual energy that goes on. And that's ultimately what we're here for. So that's the coming full circle, the takeaway. And there is so much more that we didn't cover actually in this class. So thank you for going along the journey until now. And thank you for everyone's input. I really appreciate the engagement. This was great. And for everyone's comments on the chat that we didn't get to, I apologize, we didn't get to do it and answer it during the session. You're welcome to stay on and we can have a conversation with it now. But I'd like to invite everyone, if you have an extra 3 minutes to watch an animated film together with me, which I think will leave you off with 2 things. First of all, realizing the benefit of dialogue. And second of all, a lot of quite a profound idea presented in a very cute and wonderful form. I think you'll enjoy it. If you've got another 3.5 minutes, it's a worthwhile stay. again, everyone who is not able is welcome to check out, and thank you for being here with us. This is a video which is accessible to everyone.
TorahCafe.com.
Ooh. Excuse me.
Something, but
Sorry.
promise you won't get upset. Of course. I'm not sure I really believe.
Oi. Try that again. Trying that again here. Share screen. Optimize for video clip. Let's try that again.
TorahCafe.com.
Mommy, can I share something? But promise you won't get upset. Of course. I'm not sure I really believe in electricity.
Why, my love?
Well, where is he?
Electricity is the source and the life of our lives. He's beyond us and he's also within us.
But I don't feel him in my life.
Honey, he isn't in your life. He is your life. And my life and the life of all. The power of all powers. Electricity is lighting, heating, cooling.
You mean electricity's all of us put together?
Brilliant question. No, he's not the sum total of all powers. He is one, and we are one with him, a part of him.
So electricity breaks up into parts?
No. We're not a part of him like a slice of pizza. We are partial expressions of him.
So we're electricity?
Definitely not. Electricity is us, but we're not him. He's infinitely greater than us all. He is forever one and only, and yet through each new electrical device, another limited aspect of electricity is born into the world.
You just believe that?
I know that. It's self-evident. Honey, as you get to know yourself, it becomes ever more obvious that you are part of a greater self.
But religion is such a turnoff. Look at Freddie. He's an atheist, and he's so cool.
Freddie's a fridge. Whether he believes it or not, he's cool only because of electricity.
If we're anyways part of electricity, then what difference does it make if I believe or not? Will electricity punish me? Will he blow my fuse?
We are not punished for our disbeliefs, but by our disbeliefs. When we deny electricity and go against his will, we are really going against what we truly want deep inside. Service is not oppression, but self-expression.
Is that why Kobe the Coke machine had a sign on him that said out of service?
Uh-huh.
Mommy, what happens to us when we die? Is there light after death?
We never die. We just get unplugged and return back to electricity.
Huh?
Sweetheart, we're not lamps. That's just our bodies. We're light. We come from electricity, and to him we return.
Well, what about bad guys?
They do evil, but in essence they're not evil. They're just really confused and do bad because they think, this is my power and my strength, and I can do what I please.
Well, what happens to them when they die?
You mean unplugged?
Oh, yeah.
Evildoers are in for a big shock. They too will discover how all along they were a part of him and actually wronged and betrayed their own self. The shame will hurt like hell.
So they're going to hell?
Hell nor heaven is a place. It's a realization. All are destined to know that electricity is the one supreme self. This truth is hell for those who denied it, and heaven for those who lived it.
Mom, one more question?
No, that's it. This really isn't light bedtime conversation.
But I'm so turned on.
It's time to get some sleep. Good night, my bright boy.
Okay, so I hope that brought it full circle for you. That video is actually on the extension that I showed everyone earlier, myjli.com/meditation. And so you're welcome to check out that and other resources.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And
Thank you.
some of the questions now. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Alex, nice to meet you. virtually as well.
Good night, everybody.
Rabbi.
Good night, Shannon. Good night, Lev.
Night.
And thank
I'll
you
ask.
for the question.
I'll ask my question.
Yes, let's
So-
go ahead.
Yeah. First off, great class. Really enjoyable.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you.